What's going on, everybody? Adam here. Before we get into this week's interview with David Houston, just want to let you know that we were having some serious AV issues. So if the video looks odd, it is. I'm not even in there because apparently I don't know what I'm doing in regards to recording video feeds. Anyway, the interview is still great. So if you can just stick through the technical issues, there's a lot of good stuff here. So enjoy the interview. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Coverbandconfidential podcast, the podcast for cover band musicians and band leaders to learn how to rock more and suck less. In Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Adam Johnson, and this week we are interviewing a special guest. He is a multi-instrumentalist and working musician based out of Austin, Texas, and if you aren't aware, a bit of a sensation on TikTok, and that's how I found him, and that's part of the reason why we're talking this week. David Houston. David, thank you so much for being here.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I know we've interacted some on TikTok and we kind of met through there, but this is the first time that you and I have had a chance to talk with and at each other.
Yeah.
And also bring others in, which is super cool.
Yeah. For those who don't follow me on that particular platform, I don't know if it's a bad habit, but I have a tendency to send curated posts to the people that I relate to. So David and I basically just send funny videos back and forth most of the time. The first thing we always ask our guests is, kind of your musical journey, how you got started in music, first band, how you ended up where you are today. So we'll go ahead and kick it off right there.
I will try to be brief. As you get a little older, that gets trickier. So I'm, as a guy in his mid 50s now, that becomes kind of harder to condense. But I grew up in a small town in West Texas, and music was one of those things that played a role early on. I looked up to my older sister, who was in marching band and played flute. Didn't really have a desire to play flute, but because I looked up to her, the idea of growing up and going to high school and being in band, became a thing that I thought I wanted to do. And I had a bunch of other interests along the way. But as I got into my teens, I knew music was what I wanted to do. I had it in mind at around 12 that I was going to be a drummer, and it started long before that. I kind of got derailed and I got talked into playing trombone in junior high band, kind of against what I thought I wanted to do. But I decided, pretty much I realized, I'm not going to get to be in band if I don't make that choice. So by the end of the first school year, I was really good at it. And so that kind of launched my junior high and high school band career, which I took into college a little bit. But along the way, I had picked up the guitar at around 15. And those two worlds for me kind of meshed. I was using my formal music education to kind of help with guitar playing, along with my kind of informal education on guitar, which was otherwise typical. I managed to make my way here to Austin. I must have been about 24 years old. And I kind of bounced around doing various things. I was writing some songs, played in an original band for a while, for a couple of years, around 94 to 96. And I honestly didn't really do much professionally after that. I kind of took a long hiatus. I still had a guitar. I'd still play. And, I would mess around at home, played a bit bass here mostly, but I wasn't really taking it seriously. And then around 2011, in fact, I found myself, divorced, kiddo was grown and out of the house. And I realized it's like, what am I doing? Why am I not playing music? Which was funny. I'd kind of fallen into the habit of singing karaoke because the karaoke place was like right around the corner from where I lived. And I realized it's like, why am I not singing and doing it in a professional musical context? I kind of made a challenge to myself where I said, you know what? I haven't played bass since jazz band in college, but I wonder if I went and got a bass, if I could pick it up and if I could get into a cover band. I hadn't even thought about cover bands, except it in a really vague sense, even though I knew what they were, but I just thought to myself, I wonder if I could do that. It wasn't a week before, somebody said, hey, can you come fill in with us? Off to the races. I have not stopped playing and working in cover bands since, pretty much. So that's a very condensed version of kind of how things have gone up to this point.
Yeah. So, based off of, just my observation, you are playing multiple instruments in different groups, and you're in a ton of groups. So just for kind of, I would love for you to tell everybody the kind of gigs you're doing and the kind of bands that you're working with. So if you could be like, I play this in this kind of band, I just want to hear them all in order. That would be great.
Absolutely. And it has certainly become a running joke amongst all my people that I know in real life and on Facebook, particularly in musical circles, but also just, the social circles that are trying with that. Oh, Dave's in a million bands, and I actually do stay pretty busy. I've taken pains the last year or so to kind of pare down and be really picky about what I'm doing. Sometimes things just kind of work out a certain way. So what I have going on now, the projects that take up the most time and attention for me, and this is in no particular order because I'm in love with all of them. Last September, I joined a Beatles tribute band here in Austin called the Eggmen. Now, if you're not in Austin, that may not mean a whole lot. The Eggmen is a legendary band. They have been around for 30 years. They formed in 1992. Before I even really understood what a tribute band was, they were the tribute band in Austin.
Yeah.
And so I just found myself lucky enough to be able to join them. So I'm committed to that. I'm also, you mentioned I'm a multi-instrumentalist, but it seems like the way things have worked out, I'm mostly playing bass these days. I'm also playing bass in Mock Lobster, Austin's tribute to the B-52s. We are playing more and more shows lately, and it's just even though I'm just the bass player, I kind of joke to myself that's a gig where I just have to show up and play bass because the singers are all out front, and I'm not. All I have to do is hold down the bottom. It's still an incredible amount of fun. There's a lot more going on with that one. A relatively new project that actually took a lot of preparation in the background and behind the scenes before we ever actually played shows, but it's fairly new to me. Is called Yacht Z, which is kind of a pun on Yahtzee, but it's Yacht Rock, smooth Yacht Rock, playing bass and doing a lot of vocals in that one. We actually spend a lot of time not just working up the material, it's so funny because it's such smooth, easy listening for the listener, and for a musician, you are having to raise your game to the level of these LA studio cats who are playing in from 78 to 82, and you realize I need to work to get on that level. So it's tough stuff. But we also spend a lot of time just doing pure vocal rehearsals, just to try and get those harmonies just right, just sitting around on the patio doing vocals. So I'm involved with that. I am playing keys and guitar and vocals in another band, which is an 80s kind of new wave alt-ish band called Cold War Camaro. And so that allows me to kind of satisfy the keys and synth thing, which is a relatively new instrument for me kind of late in my career. I've only been doing it in earnest for maybe a year and a half now. So I'm primarily a bassist. I don't really have any guitar gigs right now. I will fill in sometimes. Not that long ago, I got a call to do a wedding as a guitarist, as a fill-in. So that'll happen occasionally. Drums, the only active project where I'm playing drums is my band called The Nightclub, which is really a wedding event oriented band. It's designed to, play those types of shows. And my primary role, apart from being the manager and everything else, is the drummer in that band. So that, along with the odd solo acoustic gig here and there, pretty much fills up what I'm doing musically these days, along with the other kinds of fill-ins and stuff.
So the other band that I saw that you were working with, that was a concept that I wasn't even aware it could exist, was you are in a non-costume, non-makeup Kiss tribute.
Yes.
And to me, that's such an interesting concept, because Kiss being such a visually oriented band, to do something that is very stripped down and not even doing necessarily the Unmasked era stuff, like doing all the classic stuff, was an interesting concept. And as a closet Kiss fan, just tickled me because it was such a unique prospect to go that route.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny you put it that way, and you use the word interesting. And this is where the word interesting gets interesting, because it was a friend of mine, also a David. I seem to know a million Davids in my music circles in Austin. It's pretty much his baby. Oh, and also the guitarist, another David, and he and I go way back, and we have a lot of road stories. But I kind of knew about it, but he said, "Hey, I need a bass player." And at the time, I just thought, you know what? And it sounds like it could be fun. And the concept was Naked Kiss. And Naked Kiss is the name of the band. And the tagline was no makeup, no costumes, just the iconic music. And that, just as a concept, that was intriguing. I didn't really think about it much, because one of the things that attracted me to it was I got to play with my old buddy Dave on guitar, who I had known for a while. But I knew that the material that we were going to be playing was pretty much Kiss Alive, the first live album, and Alive 2. I think the only other material we dug into was War Machine off of Creatures of the Night, and I Still Love You, the other one. But it was pretty much right from that era. And the reason why that Kiss Alive album means a lot to me, and I'm showing my age here, but I was about 10 years old. I pretty much stole my brother's Kiss Alive album and wore it out. So to be able to get to play those songs and kind of say 10-year-old me, hey, we're getting to do this, that was great fun. Unfortunately, and this is in no way casting aspersions on either of the Davids in my life in that band, but I think what has happened is it was a good idea on paper. Kiss without costumes, without makeup. The music is great, and there are fans who do love the music itself. And I can listen to that stuff. But I think what happens is people, they want the full experience. I think it's kind of a novelty that didn't quite connect the way we hoped it would. And so we were just not getting much of a draw at the shows that we would play. And that's not really the reason why I left. The main reason was because when the Eggman thing came up, I wanted to devote more energy to that. And there were other projects that I wanted to be able to devote more time to. And I just said, listen, I only have X amount of bandwidth, so I'm going to put this aside.
Yeah, so, talking about a Kiss tribute, which is novel, and then doing a spin on a Kiss tribute, which is, there's a comedy term, a hat on a hat, and that's kind of what that feels like.
Yeah. Well, the thing for me is there are different approaches to doing the tribute band thing and the cover band thing. I like to say there are no rules, only notions, but some notions are better than others, of course. But I think that, one school of thought is that, you do something straight, like depending on the artist, you want to like represent the iconic personality and get the music, just right and just play the bag. And if you want to put a twist on something, you kind of have to just go hard with something really unique. And that, if nothing else, that was an attempt to just say, you know what, we can pull off this Kiss music without the costumes and the makeup, which, I think we did. We played well musically. I will say, David, who was our ace, he did wire up his Les Paul for dry ice to come out of the smoke bomb, a la Ace Frehley, and the lights to come up. He spent a lot of time doing that, so we got that working. So that was kind of a flashy Kiss move, but other than that,
you never learned how to blow fire.
But at the very least, I still think it's good for people to try something like that. You can play it straight and you have a roadmap, a blueprint to go with. That's a good way to do it. But don't be afraid to take something in another direction and just see if it'll work. You have to go out there and try it, and before and see what the audience says.
Yeah, I think every person listening to this has an example of a thing where they thought they were the smartest guys in the room that just didn't pan out.
Oh, yeah.
When I was getting back into the cover thing, I was in a group called Jukebox Zero. And the idea was that we were going to do B-sides of all of these famous bands. Yeah. And turns out people don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like you can see how it could appeal to a niche of like certain, people in your circle. And that's where we musicians have to kind of be careful not to get too stuck in our own heads about things. I've actually had conversations with other people where I tell them, listen, I have to remind myself all the time, you've got to understand what the audience wants. And sometimes you have to try it and let them sit on their hands before you realize, oh, okay, that won't work. Years ago, I was in another band. This is why people think I'm in a million bands, because I have been in them. Scottish Thunder. And it was a rock and roll cover band where we all wore kilts, and I talking this fake Scottish accent, and we would do some like rock versions of Scottish and Irish songs. And I thought, oh, it would be great, since I knew who's a great Scottish artist, Shirley Manson, Garbage. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Stupid girl, I'm only happy when it rains. I thought, oh, this is just going to go over like gangbusters. People sat on their hands. To this day, I don't quite get it, but I had to accept the reality that was just not, we couldn't keep playing it if people were not going to respond. So, we had to abandon it.
Yeah. And, we're always basically trying to come up with the next best thing. Yeah. And there's the Henry Ford approach that, if I asked what people wanted, they'd say faster horses. You have to kind of like tell people what they want before they get to it. And the Yacht Rock thing is kind of a great example of that. Now, I'm not sure if you knew this, but I cut my teeth with Yacht Rock Review. That's one of the reasons why I got back into the cover world. And I just saw your eyes get big.
Yeah.
And I know that
if I did know that, I'd forgotten. So thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. I've known those guys for years and years and worked with them for a while, because at the time before they were hitting the road a lot, there was just a lot of work to be had around town. And they had like it's not even A band and a B band now. They're just two separate entities. But there's two Yacht Rock groups. There's Yacht Rock Review, Yacht Rock Schooner. And I worked with both of them as a sub-vocalist. So you don't have to tell me how terribly challenging that music is, because
you did seem to have a look of understanding on your face when I started to talk about how complex that material is.
So I'll throw my 2 cents in and we can move on to the next thing. So I was filling in for 2 different groups, and every group had two primary vocalists, but the vocal stacks and the assignments between those two bands did not overlap. So if I was working with both of them, I had to learn I can't go for that 4 different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my experience in that world. But
I will tack onto that I believe Yacht Rock Review, they played here, I want to say last year sometime. I forget which exact time of year, which dates, but at least 2 of our members in Yacht Z, I believe Chris and Matt, went to the show. And they went for the entertainment value, of course, but it was also kind of to do recon, because to kind of get inspired and go, okay, you know, where are we at? How are we doing? And of course, the response was, I mean, yes, they're just fantastic. They're everything that everyone says about them. I will say that at least one person came up to us at the most recent Yacht Z show and complimented our vocals, saying that they were comparable to Yacht Rock Review. This is not me saying that. I am just passing along information from a fan. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that they were smart about is that they actually own the rights to use Yacht Rock in a live music capacity.
Yeah.
They actually had to tell they had to tell Christopher Cross he couldn't use it.
That is amazing.
The short story was that he was going to do this thing and put Yacht Rock in the tour name, and they flat out were like, we own the trademark, you can't do that. And he kind of pushed back, and he's like, well, we'll let you do it if you let us be the backing band.
Okay.
But that
wow, so that's how that worked out. Okay. I do want to take this opportunity, and I know we want to move on from this, but in fact, the person who really started Yacht Z is a friend and frequent musical collaborator. He has also become something of a TikTok star. In fact, he has eclipsed me in terms of followers and views recently. You may have seen him. You may have heard of him. I've known him for a long time. His name is Heath Allen. He started out with a mashup of Little John, To the Window to the Wall, with a Yacht Rock song he just started doing.
I do know that guy.
Just the Two of Us by Grover Washington Jr. Yep. And he's actually very good at this kind of thing. He has experience taking, you know, a mashup and then applying it to other songs and other styles. And he has just been off to the races because that one absolutely took off. He has been recognized on the street. You're that guy who did the thing on TikTok. So he's become quite the internet celebrity of late.
Well, actually, that's a perfect kind of segue to one of the other things I wanted to kind of dig into, which is you and I found each other on TikTok pretty much during the pandemic when everything was kind of shut down. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but you are a man of a particular vintage. But as I was trying to like find my footing, it became very clear that you understood that platform very well and leveraged that to build a sizable following. If we're doing the count as of right now, you have more followers than I do. So
yeah,
kind of came out and you kind of figured out how to do that. And I hear a lot from people in this world that say, yeah, I don't get the social media thing. I just think, you know, maybe it's a generational deal. I don't know. But I think you personally, and I don't mind gassing you up, you really are gifted in that particular realm. And it feels like you kind of cracked the code early on and benefited from that knowledge. So I would love to kind of dig into how you made your way into that world and what you kind of have picked up from going through that.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the kind words. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I think it's true to a degree that a lot of people my age, I'm 56, by the way, which makes me, I guess you would say, an elder Gen Xer, you know, who was kind of born just after kind of the cutoff that supposedly defines that generation. I think there are other creators whom I see, and which makes sense because of the way the algorithm kind of adapts to who you are and what it figures out about you. And what I get is still kind of a mixed bag, but I do see other creators, but not that many. And as a generation or as a demographic, I guess, you know, people my age, there's a real split, and I'm probably more on the minority side of guys and gals who get it. I think when TikTok first launched, I was the person who was on the outside looking in. I would see reports about it on social media. And I actually, this was some years ago, there's actually one person on Instagram. This was before Reels or anything. Yeah. They were taking clips, much the same way that people used to do with Vine clips. They would kind of repost and repurpose them. Yeah. And she was finding the dregs of the dregs of just hillbillies doing, you know, incredibly crazy, funny stuff, basically. So I kind of just to the extent I thought about it at all, that's what I thought, well, that's what TikTok is. Yeah, whatever, not for me. But around the time of all the shutdowns is when I just, out of curiosity, I said, let me kind of get an idea of what this is about. And I can't take too much credit because I think around the time that I started to look at it more and see what it could be and how I might use it, I think that's when the platform started to grow. I think a lot of other creators were kind of, and not just my age, certainly the younger ones who tend to drive that, were starting to figure out as well and kind of shape TikTok in their own image, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think if I can take credit for anything, I think I was lucky enough to be able to kind of see where it seemed to be going. And I thought, well, I wonder if I can take what I do and what I know and adapt that, because that's what a lot of successful creators seem to be doing, is they just kind of take, well, this is a skill I already have and kind of what I already know. Can I adapt it to this format and present it in a way that people might like, know?
I feel like at that time, duetting was a very big thing. And I feel like you and I ended up on a couple of duets together just kind of over that particular time. Because at that point, that was really the only kind of collaborative music thing that you could do. It was such a cool way to connect with people. And like you had kind of said, you were kind of in the right place at the right time. And I think a lot of us who were kind of curious about the platform were kind of plugging away when that happened. I feel like I got my big kind of bump before, because I was doing all of this commentary about the music industry. That's kind of where I pick stuff up. But the thing that I think is really interesting is that beyond just the success that you've had, there was a curiosity. There was a reason for you to go, this seems like something worth looking into. Maybe I should just give it a shot. And I think ultimately the thing that makes people successful is the willingness to try something they're not intrinsically good at or aware of.
Yeah. And pretty much for me, sticking to the musical kinds of topics and things I'm interested in, I think has proven to be, it's certainly what's the most satisfying for me. Now, I make a lot of videos that don't get, a ton of views, which is a common, creator experience. But kind of going back for a moment to what you mentioned was that there was kind of a perfect storm because not only did the app allow for duets and kind of encourage that, but especially for the period where so many of us were in shutdown mode anyway. And that was really like the only way that musicians had to collaborate in that kind of way. And it presented a new and interesting way, like, oh, I wonder if I could I just happened upon this random cool riff. Hey, duet me. Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll try that. And it was a way that a lot of musicians, myself included, probably were not thinking of. So I think it was a bit of a lightning strike there.
Yeah.
But so that's part of it for sure.
So I do want to shout out one other creator who, you were saying at 56, you were kind of on the outskirts. But I would be remiss to not mention Gary Jacobs, 70 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's had to change his name. He's now Gary Jacobs, 71 years old.
Got it. There's another, and I don't know his exact age. He's certainly even more seasoned than I am. I forget his entire name. He's a piano player. First name is Lauren. Mm-hmm. And he combines just this incredibly silly but genteel and accessible to everyone style of humor with his playing. And he's clearly a experienced, magnificent player as well. And he's turned that into a brand all on his own, which is fantastic.
Is he the guy that's like, now do Beethoven and
yes.
Now
yes.
Yes, I know exactly who that is. So yeah, in that world, it's just a matter of kind of finding an angle, finding a thing that you can take advantage of. Like, honestly, the thing that besides the duets that I felt like I kept getting, it was just you going super granular on like Rush.
Yeah.
Like you were just, you were in the trenches. Like you were just carrying the flag for Rush across this great land.
What's funny about that to me is that I have to acknowledge that I am and have been a big Rush fan for a long time. But Rush fandom is something that the Rush super fans, they are far and away what I could ever hope to be. It's the same with Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I've loved Star Trek for a long time. There are people who, in terms of conventions they've been to and people they've met and facts they know, just far eclipse my experience. And that's actually fine with me. So the way that I wanted to tackle that which actually brought out some people, it brings out people who really appreciate Rush. And then you always have your people who just can't be nice about anything. The list that I did, the series I did was top 10 Rush songs that aren't Tom Sawyer. And it might not be hard to figure this out, but the genesis of that was me looking at, I would see various top 10 Rush song lists that would pop up. They would all invariably almost have Tom Sawyer at the very top. Now, it's a great song, great Rush song. It's very important for them. It is what pretty much broke them on FM radio in the early 80s, even more than the song The Spirit of Radio had. It's what everyone identifies with. It's what everyone air drums to, that big staircase Tom fill, of course, everyone knows it. I thought, what would a top 10 list look like if you specifically omitted that low-hanging fruit? And then, of course, I wanted to be, well, here's my list. Well, of course, I would get, how can you leave off that list? And all Rush songs suck equally. Oh, I wasn't even like trying to manipulate the haters for views, but it worked. It happened. So
that's an interesting conversation, because dealing with Star Trek fans, like, there's a really funny saying that nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. And that's another thing that I feel like I see you talking a lot about, is not necessarily toxic fandom, but just kind of like toxic fandom, really.
Well, yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I really hopped on was, and tried to push back on, was this hardcore gatekeeping that would come up about so many things. I've tried to kind of get in from the other side of it. It's hard because I'm not as hardcore a fan as the folks who do that kind of thing. But
sure,
they've identified, in fact, it's specifically because, they've placed more of their identity into that fandom than someone like me has. So it becomes very easy to perceive certain kinds of changes, kinds of directions that this franchise or entity may take, and to perceive it as an attack of some kind on their sense of self. And so I think it leads to this, oh, you're not a real fan if, and and it leads them to behaving in toxic ways. And therefore, now it can't be excused, but I think there's a way of understanding at least where that comes from. But I felt it important to push back on that. When it comes to things like music, movies, art, let people like what they like. Sure. I think it's important, and it's an important concept, and it has to be said sometimes, occasionally it has to be said kind of firmly. So,
yeah.
And especially more lately.
Yeah. I mean, that's another kind of lane that I feel like I operate in a lot, which is calling out kind of the gatekeeping guitar community stuff, because it's rife in the musician community, and that the people that are doing it, and you nailed it. It's the thing about putting your entire personality on the shoulders of this thing. Yeah. Where like, if it's not there, like your entire worldview collapses, and how it is keeping people from participating in the thing that you ultimately need to survive in order to continue to be relevant in this particular world. It's just...
Well, one of the things that has interested me, among lots of other topics that you cover, is the fact that you talk about the use of backing tracks, and you've gone over how you've incorporated that into the way that your band works. And the reason it's interesting to me is because when I got back into this industry and hit the ground running, the band I was in used tracks. And I got lucky because the band leader who I worked with, he knew how to use them the right way. And luckily we had players who could play, and the tracks were geared toward allowing us to play and sound good as a band. And now personally, as it happens now, I've kind of gone back and forth with how I feel about tracks. And I actually feel good about the fact that none of the projects that I'm in are bands that use tracks. However, one band, the Nightclub, I had to out of necessity, and it was a good thing that I had learned how to do that and learned how to appreciate and how to use them, because they were needed in order for me to be able to do the gigs. And that's why I think a lot of musicians, they're going to be biased against the use of backing tracks because it's cheating, instead of understanding how they are incorporated into performance, especially on so many different levels now, from amateur to pro, from genre to genre. And there's a way to do it right, and there's a way not to do it. And, if you're going to criticize it, you really ought to take some time to learn how they actually work and how they're used well, or how they may not be used well. Motley Crue. Anyway.
Yeah, if they're going to use anything, they should be using it for Vince's vocals.
There you go.
But yeah, the thing that I've always felt is that people are going to use whatever works best for them. Just don't besmirch other folks for doing things that work for them.
Exactly.
I've been in bands that use them, been in bands that haven't. There's pros and cons for both. I've covered those concepts quite extensively at this point. But it is one of those kind of sticking points. Playing to a click, that's typically the thing. It's like, oh, I can never play to a track. So it's like, Well, you're saying that like it's a principle thing, but it sounds like it may be a technical skill thing.
One of the best drummers I ever worked with, he was actually disappointed when I said to one band, okay, now we're going to move away from using tracks, specifically because he liked having that click in his ear, not just for the cues, but because it kept him in time. Yeah. Now, he's a great player, and I've heard him play a million times without the use of a metronome. He's got pretty good meter, but he liked having that, tempo right there. It was just a bit of a, security blanket, if you will. And
well, it's consistency. Worked well. Yeah. If you are trying to deliver the same thing over and over again, it's a great tool to do that.
Yeah.
It's not
like
crutch.
You said, they do have their pros and cons.
Yeah. It's not a crutch. It is a tool. And
exactly.
It works in some use cases. It doesn't in others. But as long as it's a choice and not an excuse, I've got no notes.
Years ago, I can remember a quick exchange. Hey, man, were you guys using tracks? Like, if you can't tell, does it matter? So, because I got tired of having the conversation, it's like, so what? We have can't tell for sure. Does it matter?
We have a shirt design in the merch shirt that says, "Does the audience care?"
Dingo. There you go.
That's all that matters, really.
Yep.
So the last thing that I really want to kind of dig into is that you have been playing in a market that is, I don't necessarily want to say notorious, but pretty well known in regards to live music. Austin,
sure.
Has been one of those places where it's like Beale Street or New Orleans or Nashville, where you're going to go to this particular part of town and there's going to be live bands all over the place. It's there and it's ubiquitous and it's a part of the fabric of Austin as a city. But it's got its own kind of unique challenges and situations. And I just would love for you to talk me through what playing live music in Austin is like.
Well, I will tell you that, you mentioned Beale Street. And so as most people know, 6th Street is the Bourbon Street, Beale Street music row of Austin, Texas. And it's pretty well known. So yeah, and it has been this way ever since I got into town from West Texas back in 91. Very little has changed, except the population has certainly changed and makes the weekends even crazier there. But yes, you can go and hear live music. A lot of it good. A lot more of it is covers now, which is kind of funny to me, being such a cover band cat now. I remember rolling down there in 91 and there was like one place where this one cover band was playing. And I actually remember them. They were playing, I don't remember the band, but they were doing a cover of Comfortably Numb. They had this place just swaying back and forth to the outro. But silly dumb me, playing covers, man. Doing
I feel like there's just a gene that exists in musicians in their 20s that just can't get around that.
Well, I kind of saw the script flip. I didn't think about it during that time when I wasn't really playing professionally. And by the time I got ready to play again, whatever bias or prejudice I hadn't even thought about, so it made it very easy for me to get into the cover band world because I thought of it that way. But in terms of playing in Austin, now myself, I played my last gig on 6th Street March of 2022. It was a drum gig. And I knew at the end of it that it would be my last one. I've made the decision that I don't have any reason to go down there anymore or to play down there. And I'm not going to malign any of the musicians, any of the venues down there. It has just become more of a madhouse than I care to deal with, especially for a drum gig. There's one particular venue where some guys I know will ask me, and they've got like a 2 to 5 thing, and it's upstairs, and they need a drummer. I'm just like, man, I'm sorry. I know you can't pay me the rate that I am going to have to ask you for me to do that gig. So we're just not going to be able to make it work.
Well, and you've mentioned, like, I've seen a lot of posts that you've made around the pay structure for musicians in Austin. Could you kind of expound on that a little bit, like where you feel like the city is or that particular scene?
The story and the discussion always seems to really come up. It's a constant buzz and a constant topic. I mean, musicians, we're constantly talking about it, and we all have our solutions that we can never seem to implement. But always around the time of South by Southwest is when this notion of musician pay gets discussed in a big way. There's a lot of back and forth on it because a lot of people say, oh, it's one school of thought and one opinion is, oh, this multi-million-dollar festival and it's so huge and it can't pay the artists. Well, from the artist standpoint, it's not that, it's not local artists pretty much who are standing to benefit from South by Southwest anyway. From a financial standpoint, it's a different kind of thing to approach. If you want to use that festival and try to use it in a certain way, you should, and you probably shouldn't expect to get paid for it. For me, the discussion is really separate from the festival because the rest of us have to try and live and work and play here year round.
Yeah.
The article that came out, Marcia Ball, who is something of a legend around these parts, was saying that she was playing in 1978 and traveling back and forth to and from Texas, since she's originally from Louisiana. And she pulled out a calendar where the band members were, we're making 150 a night. And that was 1978. Yeah. And you still have this mentality of like, well, hey, $150. And here's the thing that I've found, and I don't want to go calling people out. I'm just talking about more. I had to kind of realize this for myself. When I look at what $150 is now, versus what it was then, a lot of times musicians just have this kind of, and I think I was in this space for a while too, where you think to myself, well, I could just be not having a gig and making nothing. And to me, what that does is inform a mindset of, well, I'm worth nothing, so anything on top of that is worth something. And I've just flipped that script where I'm like, you know what? I don't care what it makes you think of me personally. I don't want you to dislike me, but my thing is, no, I don't get out of bed for less than this amount of money. This band does not even talk to you unless you start at this particular figure. Just because we just can't afford to. I mean, it's a fun job, but I can't do it for free. Not just from a financial standpoint, from a self-worth standpoint. So, but there are so many musicians, and I don't even necessarily say that they all should adopt my way of thinking. Everybody's got to kind of come to, what they want to get out of being a musician on their own. But the problem is, it does kind of feed into lowering the going rate. If you have a large contingent of musicians who say, well, it's not just about the money for me and this is enough. Well, that's great, but we can't have a tiered structure. We don't have a way to set that up. So we need to find a way to raise the amount of pay overall. So you kind of have to get creative, or you kind of have to just look for the opportunities and mindset. Like Mock Lobster, I'll go and be happy to tell you, is a band where I'm sorry, if you want us to play your venue, your festival, that's fine, but you better come correct with the number before we even have the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, that's the leverage that a tribute can offer because it is a unique product.
Well, and especially our band, because we are at a point where, I mean, you can't get this anywhere else. Not only is it the concept, but we're really, really good at it.
Yeah.
And all respect to my friends playing in Journey tributes, but you can't throw a rock without hitting a Journey tribute band. Mm-hmm. Now, they're all very good, but I'd be hesitant to kind of jump into that because I'm like, boy, you're just you've got a lot of competition right off the bat. I don't see how you differentiate yourself. That's why you have to get creative by saying, hey, Kiss without the costumes. At least try something different to stand out if it's not already super unique. So
yeah, you could be a Journey tribute in Kiss makeup. That might be
yeah. That's at least some good spitballing to get started. Yeah, find some way to stand out.
Well, so you had mentioned 1978 and $150. I plugged that into the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics calculator, and $150 in 78 is $724 in purchase power in 2023. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, and the fact that these wages have remained flat while everything else has not. So this is where it gets a little tricky because the venues that hire us, they're our bread and butter, and there are so many of them that are so well run. I do know that a lot of bars and restaurants, they operate on thin margins. But on the other hand, when you start really looking into these parts of the business, you talk to some people and maybe they spend a lot of time in the restaurant and bar industry, and they'll tell you, no, they could afford to do it. They just don't want to. So it's a tough calculus to make, especially when you're in the position of saying, well, I want more and I think I deserve more, but actually getting across that divide, someone else is still part of the equation, and all they can do is say yes or no. And more than likely, they're going to say no. And we are talking about musicians who, you've got to have a product out there to offer. It's got to be a cover band. When I talked about the script, flipping,
yeah, cover bands really were generally kind of culturally looked down upon in Austin for a while. That's completely changed.
Yeah,
I think at least there has been a bit of a surge in that regard. Or you've got to have a really good angle. Madame Radar is a band that has really gotten a lot of attention lately out of Austin, and they play rock and roll. They just do it so well, and they've got a real vibe and personality to them that helps them stick out. Hard to manufacture that, but it's kind of what you have to have before you can start say, well, I want to command more money. Like, yes, you should get more money, but you should also do the things that are going to make people want to give you more money, So that's part of the equation.
That's exactly what this entire podcast is about, is people understanding their worth and doing what it takes in order to make good money playing music. That's like the tagline of all of the things. Now, you were talking about bands with a draw in that area. And I know for a period of time, there was a Spasmatics installation in Austin. Is that still the case?
They do come around fairly often. Haven't seen them play lately. There was one particular venue where they played quite a bit. That venue, it was kind of an open air courtyard venue, which has recently changed ownership, and that ownership is not really putting on regular live music shows. They're just doing kind of special events these days.
Gotcha.
So I do know about Spasmatics. I've played with a couple of people in that cover band that I joined back in 2011. Which we did a lot of work with. A couple of guys who subbed in and I got to play with, they've gone on to join the Spasmatics, both the A team and the B team. So I'm proud to say, hey, I knew those guys. So
nice.
Yeah.
Some of the guys in the Patreon were asking about some specific things about Austin. It has become kind of this weird celebrity hotbed. Like, have you run into any famous folks playing out over the past few years?
I haven't really. I kind of, for me, I just tend to see about it on social media. Every once in a while, I'll be out and about and I may see someone who I recognize as being kind of famous. But for me, just getting to join the Eggman, because I went to go see those shows and I knew what legends they are. And I'm like, wow, I get to actually join the band. The way it worked out was Matt, who is a drummer who I work with in Yacht Z and Mock Lobster. He's the one who recruited me into Mock Lobster. About a year and a half ago, he ended up getting the drummer gig with the Eggman after having done some fill-in work. And then their bassist, who was a founding member, decided, I'm retiring from the band. And so I said, hey, listen, I'm going to recommend you for this gig. What do you think? And it was like, wow. So to me, these guys were kind of legends in the music scene already, just kind of on the level of a Tommy Shannon or an Eric Johnson, who I years ago I managed to run into. So for me, I don't even necessarily think about getting starstruck by other celebrities because my mind is still kind of blown that I got to join this legendary band after all these years.
That's awesome. I mean, every one of us ultimately want to be in a position where like our heroes become our friends, and music is one of the equalizers that give you the opportunity to do that kind of thing. I have plenty of stories that are like that too, and it is really awesome to kind of think through. So, David, I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight. If anybody out there wants to kind of keep up with you, what are the best ways for them to kind of find you online?
The TikTok thing, I go back and forth on, and I haven't been as active on it lately. I'm kind of gearing up to maybe be on there more. But on Facebook, my page, which is simply titled David Houston Music, it has a big blue logo with my initials, hard to miss. That's a good way. I stay pretty active on Instagram, and it's the same username there, David Houston Music. Those are probably the two best ways to follow along with what's going on. I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm going to recharge and start producing more content, because I actually do need to put some more of these kind of things on the old TikTok. Hopefully will stay around for a while, but also YouTube. That's what I need to do a little bit more of. So hopefully the next time we talk, I can say, yeah, catch me, because I'm all over YouTube. But for now, the Facebook page and Instagram are probably the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. We'll be sure to put those links in the show notes as well. So if anybody wants to keep tabs on you, they'll be able to do that. So Dave, thanks again. I'll go ahead and call it for this week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you want to support the show, you can do any of the things that Adam from the Van Band is about to tell you, but I'll go ahead and call it for this week. From Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Adam Johnson. You've been listening to the Coverband Confidential podcast for the week of April 21st, 2023.